not a lot of toned-down rhetoric that they promised would come following the tragic attempted assassination over the weekend. The Daily Show points that out.
Word on the street was that the RNC speeches were going to be civil and polite now. So, bring on the good vibes.
The Democrats' disastrous record on crime, trade, and regulation has ruined the lives of countless Minnesotans.
Your family is less safe.
Biden's violent crime crisis.
Our children are dying.
War on families.
Woke indoctrination trampled underfoot by the radical left. Biden and the Democrats are doing everything they can to tear down this great country.
America cannot afford 4 more years of a weekend at Bernie's presidency.
Kumbaya, my lord. Kumbaya. I mean, I guess this is toning it down. And for the record, it is totally unfair to compare Joe Biden's presidency to Weekend at Bernie's, okay? For one thing, Bernie could pass as an alive person, okay? Also, that movie got a sequel.
A perilous moment for American democracy that would be funny if it wasn't so scary. One candidate, our current president, sick with COVID, has calls from his own party to step aside or ratcheting up because the threat from the other, the wannabe autocrat, is too great, too vast. It's where we start the hour with some of our favorite reporters and friends. In Milwaukee at the convention, staff writer for The Atlantic, Tim Alberta, is here. Plus, political strategist, MSNBC senior analyst Matthew Dowd is here with us in New York. Former RNC spokesperson, host of the Bulwark podcast, Tim Miller. Tim Alberta, you have written some pieces that, when the history of these times are told, will be in there, starting with your Susie Wiles, Chris LaCivita reporting, and then your J.D. Vance reporting, and your other dispatches from the convention. So congratulations to you. Let's work backward, though. Take me inside this moment as we await what has been described as a somewhat changed Donald Trump.
Well, thank you, Nicolle, first for saying that. It's very kind of you. Look, I think the degree to which Donald Trump has changed, has been transformed by this near assassination just a few days ago, we'll really get a glimpse at it tonight. And, you know, I have covered scores and scores of Trump's speeches around the country. I have traveled with his campaign at length over the last 8 years. I've seen him in a lot of different venues, in a lot of different moods, striking a lot of different tones. I've never heard a tone of humility, of reconciliation. I've never heard a tone of genuine reflection. And according to some people who are close to him and who have spoken with him since the events of last Saturday, they have heard traces of that. They have heard hints of that. And I think they are genuinely curious, as are the rest of us, whether that will come through tonight in prime time as the nation waits to hear from the former president for the first time since he was nearly killed. But Nicolle, if past is at all prologue, I don't know that we should expect a dramatically different version of Donald Trump tonight. If we see one, then obviously that scrambles sort of everything we know about this campaign, this election, and even potentially the future of the country. But I think to say that we should expect that would be putting the cart way ahead of the horse.
Yeah, a cart that's never been spotted on the planet before. Tim Alberta, your reporting is so important and revealing about how they see the race. And you're reporting, the line that sort of kept me up all night the day that I read it, was that they are, in their view, what they're seeing is a landslide victory for Donald Trump. I wonder if you can sort of explain then the selection of J.D. Vance, and that landslide is predicated on running against Donald Trump, or running against Joe Biden, based on in your story and your reporting. What happens to all those predictions and assumptions, and even the J.D. Vance pick, if that ends up not being who they face in November?
Sure. Nicolle, I'll take the first part and just emphasize that the J.D. Vance selection is the clearest indicator of the Trump campaign's confidence that they're not only winning this race, but that they are running away with this race. They believe that they are headed towards a blowout in November. And the J.D. Vance pick, as one person close to the president described it, he said, look, the revolution is on, right? That's the only proper interpretation of taking a guy like J.D. Vance, who has some baggage and who's not necessarily the person that you would select if you're worried about appealing to the suburban moms outside of Milwaukee and Detroit and Philly and Phoenix and elsewhere. But J.D. Vance does share at some core visceral level the sort of raw, visceral populism that Donald Trump has been successful in selling to the masses, and Trump sees in him an heir apparent to the MAGA empire here. However, it's clear that he would not have necessarily made this selection if we were in a really tight race. But the Trump campaign, from all of its modeling, all of the polling that they've done, they believe that the race is already effectively over. Now, if that's the case, if they have created a situation where by midsummer that they have already buried their general election opponent in Joe Biden, then of course they don't want to see the Democrats change horses. In fact, Nicolle, what I reported from Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita after spending months with them is that this campaign, this Trump campaign, more than any other that I've covered, is very specifically engineered to run a very specific race against a very specific opponent in Joe Biden. And at this point, the Trump people are basically just praying that he doesn't leave the race, because if he does, and if they have to go back to the drawing board, it would force them to have to fundamentally recalibrate everything they've done, from the micro-targeting, the modeling, the money that they're spending, where they're spending it, the digital campaign that they're running. Everything that they have optimized in this campaign to date has been meant to defeat not a generic Democrat, but Joe Biden. And so they do not want to see him step aside.
I mean, Matt Dowd, the revolution is on in the room. And for all the critiques of President Joe Biden being in some sort of bubble, I mean, I understand the confident read, and I actually appreciate the confident posture, having worked on campaigns myself. But the reality doesn't really match that. I mean, the race is fluid. The point in the calendar isn't really, measure for your gold toilet done. Nothing's done. There's no fat lady singing. There's a lot of politics left to be played. And I wonder how much the public projection of strength and what Tim Alberta has been able to report may actually factor in, either consciously or subconsciously, to the very serious sort of pro-democracy alarm bells going off in the Democratic coalition.
Well, I think you've raised all valid points, and let me just second Tim Alberta and what he's done, being a fellow Michigander, and all the work he's done. Bravo to him and everything he's done in the course of the last few years. To me, this exuberance about whether or not they're going to win and by how much in a landslide, it made me think, do they think Joe Biden won in a landslide in 2020? Because they're not going to win by 7 million votes, popular votes. It's just not going to happen, possibly. And they're saying they're going to take all the states back. So basically, what they're telling us is Joe Biden won in a landslide in 2020, and they think they're going to repeat that this time. This race is still so fluid, though there are some parameters of it very set. I don't think this convention this week is going to move a single voter. I don't think it's going to cause any bump. But the last 2 or 3, 4 conventions that have been held back to 2012 haven't really moved anybody in the course of this. The only time people get moved if there's a surprise or something major happens in the course of the convention. That didn't happen with the J.D. Vance pick. It was just ho-hum, okay, here we go, another sycophant added on the ticket. What I think should worry the Trump campaign is, since the debate, they have basically had 21 or 22 straight positive days for themselves. They've had 21 or 22 positive straight days, and that's allowed them to stretch a lead to 2 or 3 points. That should be concerning to them about their candidate, and that should be concerning to them about their policies and their vision and what they're offering to the American public. Because in the course of a campaign in the summer, when you have 21 or 22 straight days that are beneficial to you and negative to the opposition, and you're only able to move the needle by 2 or 3 points in the course of the race, shows, one, this race is going to be close, though I do think Trump has an advantage today, especially electoral college-wise. But this race is never going to stretch past the 3 or 4 point margin scale. It's just not, with the way things are polarized, with how Democrats are lined up, it's never going to be beyond 3 or 4 points. And a 3 or 4 point victory in a polarized environment is a significant victory.
Tim Miller, let me bring you in on this. I know you had some audio challenges, but let me just bring you in on this question of the projection of strength, rooted both in Donald Trump's actual standing in the race, especially the battleground polls reflect it today, as well as all the assumptions that they've made, and Tim Alberta's excellent reporting about the entire campaign being engineered for a run against President Joe Biden. That situation remains fluid, but one of the things that would happen if the Democrats made a different calculation, if Joe Biden made a different decision, is that the Trump campaign would sort of be back at square one.
Absolutely. I think Tim's reporting in the Atlantic on this was spot on. I think this kind of strong versus weak, alpha versus beta thing is what the Trump campaign is trying to do. If that got scrambled with their opponent, the type of energy that could potentially be there for their opponent, a potential prosecutor going after them, I do think that would change things and change their calculation. But there's one thing about tonight I think that's worth thinking about in this context, because so far I've agreed with kind of the consensus punditry that's like, it's been crazy for the first 3 days, but it's been kind of normal crazy, if you will, like slightly toned down. It hasn't been, like some of the weirdest stuff that we've seen in the past from Trump world. Tonight is a little different than that, I think, if we look at this lineup. And if you look at it through this frame that Tim reported on about strength and how they tie that to this machismo, tonight is a lineup of, it's like a freak show of bros that are on the lineup tonight. It's nothing like any convention in the past, and so that's different than the other nights. You have Tucker Carlson, who's been advancing these extreme conspiracy theories. He's like, Russia's great now, as Tucker Carlson, and he did an interview with a gay prostitute that he thinks had an affair with Obama, and he's doing racist great replacement theory and all of this, and January 6th trutherism, all this nonsense that Tucker's been doing. And then you have they've added Hulk Hogan and Dana White. Dana White, who's this UFC guy. There's video of him slapping his wife very hard that's going around on the internet. Hulk Hogan was accused by his wife of domestic abuse. He denies that. But, and then you have Donald Trump, who has been found by juries of his peers to be liable for sexual abuse, and who admitted on tape that he likes to grab women by the you-know-what against their will. So that's their bro night tonight, like conspiracies, sexual assault, people that commit sexual assault, and to me that feels like a big risk compared to the consensus of the other 3 nights was, maybe they toned it back. This lineup isn't toning it back. This is WWF freak show tonight.
I don't even know where to go with that. What's the follow-up question? Be me. Matt Dowd, let me come to you. The assumption, and Tim, reveals this and writes this. The assumption is that they have something locked up. And I just wonder if you can pull on that assumption a little bit more. The big structural rug that could be pulled out of them most completely, right, would be to run against somebody different. Everything about the campaign is predicated on their, 77-year-old candidate looking young compared to an 81-year-old candidate. Literally everybody else on the menu undermines that. But also this bet that they don't need anyone outside of the J.D. Vance Donald Trump coalition could also be scrambled. Just take me inside the different ways the election could shift and how quickly.
Well, in my view, and I think I've written about this, is if the Democrats present at their convention